Despite being one of the most water rich nations in the world, for generations, Canada has been unwilling, unable to guarantee access to clean water for Indigenous peoples. So, the water in dozens of communities has been considered unsafe to drink for at least a year, and the government has admitted to its failure. In 2015, when Justin Trudeau was running for office, he made a promise to end the scourge of unsafe water in more than 100 First Nations communities in the country by the end of March of 2021. So if we're talking about it in August 2022, they've missed the mark. So yeah. So to date, they really have no credible excuse for how communities have gone decades without clean water. Members of the Cowichan Tribes First Nation on Vancouver Island have lived along the Indian Road since the 1940s, but haven't had potable water during that entire time. So last month, 20 households from the community were connected to the city of Duncan's water supply. Fun fact, the city of Duncan was founded in 1912, so before the 40s, and it's located 2 kilometers from the reservation. So that's 1.2 miles. Um, my question to you is this just a drop in the bucket or the start of making good on Canada's promise?
Real quick. So you said they didn't have potable water, so that means like they didn't have where were they? Where were they? What kind of water were they getting?
So the water was tainted. If you listen to some of the article or some of the videos and stuff, some of it was tainted brown, tasted like salt. Some of the complaints were if you treated bug bites with the water that came directly from the tap, it would actually develop into a rash or aggravate it. So
So
people
was it like
have
well
to,
water?
well,
They were getting well water. Is that was it? Or how were they
it's,
getting? Or was it straight
yeah,
from the river? Do you know?
Yeah, from the well.
I,
It was
to,
from
to
well.
be honest, I guess it would be a mix of wells. It would be a mix of water supplies, mixed water supplies.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so most of these communities are under boiled water advisory all of the time. But some of them would go to, say, the gas station with jugs of water and they would fill up there. So they would get their water from there, or you can buy water in bulk. If the next nearest city is 1.5 miles, you have to drive, but you don't have it coming directly to your home
Yeah. So
until a month ago.
yeah, when I think of like, because we have here in the U.S. a lot of rural areas that aren't connected to the public water or sewer lines. And I don't know, they get by just fine with just well water or septic tanks. I'm assuming that maybe they just couldn't afford clean well water or I don't know, or they couldn't afford to filter their well water or
Yeah,
I'm
the
not sure. I'm
filter.
not sure what it was. I'm not sure how they were getting their water, but maybe they just didn't have the money to do it. Because, like I say, I would say more than half our country is not on public water supply, especially when you start to go down south and Midwest and things like that. They're using well water or other things like that. So, but if they're having problems where the water is not clean and stuff like that, um, yeah, that's horrible. I mean, it's good that they finally are getting a running tap water and they're finally connecting them. It's just when I was hearing about it, it was like, I don't know, it's sort of like what we have here. But I was trying to figure out how our communities get by, and because my grandmother was also on and had a home in a rural area there, she was using well water, but she did have sewer and stuff like that. But her well water and the well water, of course, didn't taste great. It doesn't have fluoride like tap water does. So, of course, people's teeth, like in West Virginia, you'll see people with bad teeth and stuff like that because they don't have their own well water and stuff like that. So, yeah, but I think it's a great thing. I'm glad to see Trudeau uh, taking action there. What do you think, Johnny?
No, that's it's what why did it take so long? I think it's kind of mind blowing that it's like a drop in the bucket towards progress, but that's just what it is, a drop in the bucket. And it still really is shocking to know that still so many communities, like even now, um, in the in the indigenous, I think they're tribes. You said, Rob, in Canada, they still don't have clean water access. There's still a lot of them that don't. I think it's like 30 to
Mhm.
40. Um, it reminds me of like Flint over here, Flint, Michigan, and how
Thank you,
they had the
Gianni. Thank you,
helicopter
Gianni.
situation. And I think that government, I remember reading the article, couldn't understand all of the technical terms, but I do remember it saying basically the government wasn't paying for the water to be filtered or to be cleaned in those indigenous tribes. And so it was like nobody was doing it. Nobody was cleaning the water or filtering it.
They didn't have the infrastructure in place to treat the water. That is what the issue is in a lot of those communities.
And there was a tribe member, I think her name was Adrian. Let me see. She says that the water from, hold on. She says the water from her well was unusable, and she remembers her father filling jugs from a water at a gas station for 14 years. And
Mm.
another member says when her babies were infants, they had to boil the water, let it cool, and then fill up their bathtubs just so they could bathe. So for them to miss the mark, I mean,
Yeah.
the karma.
I mean,
It's
it's a
Yeah.
shame. I mean, I don't even know how the communities, because like I say, the United States, and I'm not talking indigenous community. I'm talking about just regular people in rural areas don't have the same issue, especially like West Virginia and things like that. They
right.
just don't have access to, like you say, clean water. I mean, I don't know why West Virginia is particularly the one that comes to mind, but I know that's an issue. Like I say, in 2022, we're still having that same issue. Um, I mean, it's just crazy. But I will say, I mean, just to make one other point, I don't know, well water in some ways is actually better than tap water. Uh, if it's properly filtered and if it's not contaminated, mostly
Spring
because it doesn't
water.
have all those chemicals. I mean, if you knew the chemicals that are in tap water, you would be like, it's it's pretty it's pretty aggressive chemicals, the chlorine and there's a
Oh
lot
yeah.
in tap water that's
Mhm.
Yeah.
it's pretty
You know,
intense. Um, but again, we don't. Yeah. Anyway, sometimes well water is better. Just depends on the situation. Doesn't sound like theirs was though.
yeah.
Lizzie.
I mean, there are a lot of ifs though with well water.
Yep. True.
And
Can be
if it's
contaminated really
filtered,
easily.
if it's clean, if it's not contaminated, I think this is a good thing, but a travesty of justice in the 21st century. And it's just
Yeah.
Yep.
another example of, indigenous people not being taken care of, minority groups not being taken care of, people who are a different socioeconomic status are being
Poor
overlooked
people.
and not taken care of, poor people, if you will, not being
Yeah.
taken care of. And it's a shame. Like, okay, it's great that this is finally happening now, but it's 2022. It's 2022. Like this should not be like a, oh my God, yes, in 2022. And so
No.
Mhm.
hopefully, Rob, that hopefully this becomes the norm and not just, the exception. But even in like in America, so the United States, we have one of the um best water filtration systems in the world. However, like Gianni brought up, in Flint, Michigan in 2014, all hell broke loose when they figured out that the water was contaminated with lead. I remember
Yep.
back in the 90s, several times coming home to Washington, D.C., you could not drink the tap water. Like they
Wow.
would do
I
like
remember
public
that.
service announcements of how you could not drink the tap water. If you were to drink it, you needed to boil it first because one of
Yep.
the sources out at Chesapeake Bay, there were chicken droppings and other nastiness that was in the water that had not been filtered.
Wow.
you know and like Neo said, you go to certain areas in this country where people are still living below the poverty level. Yes, they are drinking water that is not safe. And
Hmm.
so yeah,
Yeah.
folks are getting by, but we don't know how well they're getting by. Like, yeah, they may be living, but we don't know what they're living with,
Life
what that
expectancy is lower. Yeah.
exactly,
Hmm.
what diseases they have, what health issues they're going through. And so this is a thing. This is really a thing. And, I think it kind of gets into your topic that we're coming up with, Neo, in terms of what we actually pay taxes for.
Mm.
But this should be a no brainer.
What are
This
your
should
thoughts, Rob?
really
Hmm.
be a no brainer.
What are your
Clean
thoughts,
water.
Rob?
Yeah.
Clean water.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that this is long overdue, and like Johnny said, like it's mind blowing that it's taken this long, like to tap like 2 kilometers away, 1.2 miles to tap
Mm,
into a water supply. it shouldn't have taken 80 years to do this for this community. Um, I promise you, if there was oil in these communities, that they would find a way to
Mm,
build a pipeline to get that oil
preach,
out.
Rob.
But
You better
they
preach,
can't
Rob.
seem to build a pipeline to get them clean water. But I
Okay.
just wanted to note that despite the progress, there are water advisories still present in 94 First Nations communities. So that's about one in every six First Nations communities. And that was the start of 2022. The ISC, Indigenous Services Canada, data indicates that there are at least 29 communities across Canada still operating under a boil water advisory. There are still 34 long-term drinking water advisories on reserves, including some that have been in place for more than 25 years. Wrap your head around that. There's an issue with the
Wow.
water, and it's still ongoing 25 years down the road. And like Johnny mentioned, there's a deficit in funding for the maintenance and the operation of drinking water systems on the reserves. So now that they've kind of got things going, they estimate that the issue with clean drinking water will not be fully addressed until 2023, 2024, and that it will take till 2025, 2026 to make sure that we have long-term solutions that are sustainable. So
Well,
it's I'm glad that it's
good.
happening. It's just shameful that it's taken this long, and it's shameful that there's still so many communities that are doing with it.
Some great
Yeah.
comments online. We've got Robin Johnson, Dr. J saying, horrible that this is just getting righted in 2022. Flint, Michigan still doesn't have clean water. Companies like
Mm.
Still,
Nestle want to make water for profit. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then Sherry Blaine Savory says, disappointing it took so long. Unfortunately, many other issues with the community continue to be unresolved. I guess the indigenous community. I wish
Yeah.
government would start putting money into these types of matters ahead of others and just throw money at it randomly. Uh,
please.
Jos- Jose says it must be life changing for the people finally get clean water. I could never imagine. Um,
Yeah.
there are still so many communities in the U.S. and Canada that don't have access to clean water. It blows my mind. Yeah, that was the
And
first thing that
remember,
came to
people,
my mind.
it's not only drinking, it's brushing your teeth, it's washing, putting water on your skin. It's a lot of different things that clean water
Mm-hmm.
Wash
affects about our
food.
livelihood.
Yes.
Yeah, food, cooking, all of
Truth,
that, all of
lies,
that.
All
shenanigans.
right, is this truth, lies, or shenanigans? I got shenanigans.
A dose
I
of
mean, truth.
truth.
That's saying shenanigans. Good stuff,
I'm
Rob.
into my truth.
It's
You're
truth.
bringing us
It's
truth
true.
every week now. Good stuff.
I know.
Non non intentional.